Oh, hello there. Hi, friends. This is Miss Sira from the Red Bank Public Library, and this is today's session of RAD Lab Story Times. Do you see what I have here? This is our clue for what we're going to be talking about today. This is called a telescope. And a telescope is the instrument that we use to look up into the sky at the stars and the moon and the planets. And so this is a fun little telescope that we have at the library. And I brought it home today because I have a special story for us to read about constellations. Do you know what a constellation is? A constellation is a grouping of stars. Have you ever gone outside at night and just looked up, either in your backyard or at the beach, or if you're in the mountains, that's even better. The further you can get away from street lights and house lights, the more you can see up in the sky. So a constellation is a grouping of stars that you can see with your eyes. You don't necessarily need a telescope. And when you connect the dots of the stars, sometimes they appear to form the shape of maybe a person or an animal or a mythical creature or an item. And so constellations are super cool. I'm going to read you a good book right now, and then we'll do a constellation craft with items that you should have at your home. And I'll show you something cool also. All right, this is called Starcrossed. It's by Denos, and it's just a beautiful book. I love the illustrations. It's a new book from the library. Do you see this girl looking up into the stars? And do you see the constellation that she sees? That gives you an idea of what the story's about. Let's take a look. I'm gonna have to scoot over a little bit so you can see these pictures. It says, it was a time, let me hold this right. It was a time when there were still students of the stars. Eridani was one of them. And Akamar, well, he was more of a constellation than a boy. See him peeking down here and tumbling through the sky? She was made of blood and bones, and he was made of space and stars. And even though they lived pretty far apart, they were best friends. At the end of each day, Akamar would call to her over the sunset, "Hey, Eri, can you see me yet?" Eridani would shout into the sky, "Almost." Eridani was always looking up, out any window she could. Her eyes were always full of stars. It was how they met in the first place. You see the twinkles in her eyes? Looking up so much made her good at sky maps and star plots. So Professor Lunarius put Eridani in charge of the most important celestial projects at school. There are people that can map the stars, just like we have maps of our planet. Every evening after lessons, the students would walk back to their homes in pairs, except for Eridani. She walked alone, but she wasn't really alone. "How was class?" Akamar asked her one night, doing somersaults over a moon. "Good," said Eridani into the sky, "but I still want to know more." "Like what?" called Akamar. "Like, how ancient are the stars? And how deep is space? Or does it go on forever? How do comets feel?" she asked. "They tickle." And Eridani laughed and Akamar smiled, and then he had a question for her. Eri, what's sunset like? Eridani's heart fell, knowing Akamar would love sunset, but he would never get to see one. She changed the subject. Akamar, what's flying like? She asked. And Akamar's stars dimmed, knowing Eridani would love flying, but she would never get the chance. He changed the subject too. Want to race the rest of the way? Akamar asked, like always. But this time, he felt too far. He wanted to be down in the sand. Okay, said Eridani, but this time her feet felt too heavy. She wanted to be up in the stars. Akamar, do people ever wish on stars? She asked. All the time, he said. And Akamar looked down at the stars in his body and offered them to her. You could wish on me if you want, he said. Thanks, said Eridani, choosing a bright one near his heart. She wished she could return the favor. She wished they could wish together. Can't you wish, Akamar? I'm not sure, he said. He never thought of trying to wish until now. There were Eridani's eyes, so full of stars. He chose a bright one right before she closed them. Then Eridani wished on Akamar, and Akamar wished on Eridani. Don't peek or it won't work. I won't. It worked, it says. You see her? Sparks tickled in Eridani's skin. Space shimmered blue under her fingernails. Her bones dissolved into stardust as her body filled with light. It'll be the best surprise, they thought at the same time as they flickered through the night with their eyes closed. Look. Whoa! That says. And this says, whee! What do you see what's happening? Akamar? What? I don't see you. Don't look yet, he said. Eridani couldn't help but look. She could see that her friend was not in his usual place. The sky was empty where he had just been. Akamar! Akamar was too busy to answer her. He was watching his blood and bones appear. He was watching the rivers and sand grow wider and the lights of Eridani's city grow warmer. And the window where she slept grew closer and closer. See, he's coming down to earth. Oh, this picture has no words. Boom, this says. Wow. I'm here. I'm here. Where? Where? Akamar looked up. There were stars in the dome of the sky, and there was a new constellation where he had been. There was Eridani? Eridani heard his voice through the misty atmosphere of the planet she had just left. She followed his light past familiar constellations, backwards and downwards. And there was Akamar, bright as ever. "How did you get way up there?" asked Akamar. "I wished," said Eridani. "For what?" he asked. "To be where you are," answered Eridani. "Oh," Akamar replied, "me too." Space settled sadly between them again. For a moment, they felt sorry for themselves and for their spent wishes. "Well, it worked," said Eridani, shivering. "It always does," said Akamar, walking away from his crater. "It's different, but the same," said Eridani. "We're still apart." Then a comet zoomed across her nose. "That tickles." "I told you." Eridani laughed and Akamar smiled. Eridani's shiver became a shimmer, and it felt good to shimmer. Akamar let his new toes sink into the soft sand. It felt good to sink. No words on this page, but do you see them exploring all the things that they can do in their new forms? Dancing and jumping and floating and spinning. "It's like home," said Eridani, among the stars she loved. "Yeah," said Akamar, enjoying the night air on his new skin. "But I wish I could see you better. Eyes don't reach very far." He looked up at his friend, and she was just a few dots in the sky now. "Oh, you can have my spyglass," cried Eridani, flying over the desert. "Why don't you go to school tomorrow? I left it on my desk." Spyglass is like an old-fashioned telescope for seeing the stars. So the next evening, Akamar put sandals on. It felt wonderful to have feet. He used them to walk into his first sunset, following the path he'd seen Eridani take every day to school. She called to him from behind the glow. "Akamar, can you see me yet?" "Almost," he said. When he arrived at the observatory, the classroom was echoing with excitement. "A shooting star last night, class, and a new constellation in the sky. We need every student on task," rang Professor Lunarius. "Where is Eridani?" Akamar stepped carefully from the shadows. "Maybe I can help," he said. The professor studied him through her glasses. "Who are you?" "My name is Akamar." "Akamar, what do you know about the stars?" she asked. Eridani laughed and Akamar smiled. Here she is up there. And he said, "Plenty," because he knows a lot about stars, right? Isn't that a cool book? And guess what? Eridani and Akamar are real constellations up in the sky. The brightest star is Eridanus, and they are twin stars. So that's something that we could take a look at maybe on the computer and learn more about. But I just love the pictures, the illustrations in this book. I think they're so nice, and it's a sweet story. It's too bad that they ended up apart, but I think they'll be friends forever. I do believe that. So I hope that you enjoyed it. We're gonna make a cool constellation, like glow jar, that's easy for you to make at home. And then I'm gonna show you something cool that I discovered on my phone that you could probably do at home too. So let's get to it. I actually want to show you this app first because it's so cool. It's called Skyview Light. You can download it onto a phone for free. You line up the image of the moon there to the real moon, and then it shows you the surrounding stars and the constellations that they're a part of. See the blue lines linking the stars, and then the constellation. It shows you the name, and you just move it around and see what you can see. So fun. Give it a try. So we're going to make a constellation glow jar now that we've seen some cool constellations. It's a simple project. All we need is a jar. It could even be an empty jar from spaghetti sauce, whatever you have at home. This is a light. I just got it from the dollar store, but you could also use a candle, and even better than a real candle would be an electric candle with a battery in it. You need a Sharpie or a marker of some sort, and then something that you can poke holes in aluminum foil. That's our last ingredient. You could use the tip of a pencil or a pen or even a toothpick. So let me show you how to get started. First, you need a piece of foil that's big enough to cover your jar, whatever size that is. You want it to be able to wrap all the way around and cover the jar. And then once you know you have that, you just lay it out straight, and we're going to draw a constellation on here. Doesn't have to be a complicated one. Look, I did the Big Dipper on this one. That's pretty simple. It looks like a pot that you might cook that spaghetti in. And I'll do another one on this new sheet of aluminum foil. So I'm going to use my Sharpie, and you might need to look up the constellation in a book or on the computer, or guess what? You can invent your own constellation or just make a bunch of stars. Anything is going to look great. But connect the stars from your main constellation if you make one, and then use your pointy object to poke some nice holes in those stars or points. Just like that. It's pretty simple to poke a hole in some aluminum foil, so be gentle. And then we want to surround our constellation with a bunch of stars, just like the night sky. You can make big ones, little ones, and really put them all over because we want them to glow. Have you figured out what we're going to do with this? We're going to wrap it around our jar and then put a light inside that will glow through all of these holes. I tried to make a lot of stars. I might want more, but let's give this a try. I'm going to wrap this around the jar. Here we go. And then to make it stay, I'm going to crumple the bottom under the jar and crumple the top so that it all stays together. And then we want to try it with our light. Now it's not very dark in this room, so it's not the best example, but imagine if it was dark and this was glowing. Can you see a little bit of the light poking through?
If I put the lid on, it might work a little bit better, but I think you should give this a try. Maybe put some more stars in there and then see what it looks like at night in your room. It's going to be so cool. Good project.
So wasn't that app pretty cool? You just point it up at the sky and you can see where all the constellations are. I love it. I also hope that you really get a chance to try that project because I think it would be awesome for you to have that in your room and have it just lit up like stars. I just want to show you a couple books. If you're interested in space and stars, you know we have books at the library. This one is about the moon, and this one is about constellations, and this is just a sampling that I brought home, and there's so much more information in books and online, so check those out. Hey, thanks for coming to today's Rad Lab Story Time. I hope you're enjoying this program. I am, and I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.